Spirit warriors, the performance was flawless. The silence was louder than a mic drop. And the grand finale, your exit. Have you ever walked away from a situation so smooth, so spiritually guided, that even heaven gave you a standing ovation? It's not just poetic imagery. It's the kind of moment that happens when a chosen one finally understands their divine worth. Imagine this. For years, you were underestimated, even ridiculed. You sat at tables where every smile was a mask and every conversation a trap. The people around you weren't friends, they were distractions dressed as allies, and yet you stayed calm, you didn't react. Why? Because deep inside you were tuned into something higher. While others schemed in low frequency, you were vibrating on God's frequency. You weren't being passive, you were preparing, you were healing, you were praying, you were listening. Science now tells us that the heart has a powerful electromagnetic field, more potent than even the brain's. When you're aligned with divine purpose, that heart energy becomes a beacon. It communicates with your surroundings, drawing truth and repelling deceit. That's not just spirituality, it's biology meeting divinity. And when the moment arrived, when your spirit told you it was time to move, you didn't cause a scene, you didn't need closure, you didn't need an audience, you simply, and in doing so, you triggered something powerful. Your absence became louder than your presence. Your silence started echoing through the rooms you used to walk through. The ones who once mocked you, now they replay every word you ever said, searching for meaning. Those who tried to trap you, now caught in their own web of envy and confusion. You see, the world often glorifies loud exits, burning bridges, slamming doors, throwing final punches. But chosen ones operate differently. Biblically, even Jesus withdrew from crowds and chaos to fulfill his higher mission. He didn't argue with Pharisees, he walked past them. He didn't explain his every move, he let his purpose speak louder. That's the model you follow, whether you realize it or not. Your exit wasn't random, it was divine timing in action. The Hebrew word for peace is, which doesn't just mean the absence of conflict, but the presence of wholeness. That's what you carry when you walk away. You don't just leave behind a space, you leave behind spiritual clarity. This is why your departure felt like a disappearing act. No texts, no farewell speeches, just a clean break orchestrated by heaven itself. You didn't ghost people, you elevated beyond their reach. And now they're left in the aftermath, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. The truth? It went wrong the moment they underestimated the power of someone who walks with God. That's the sacred art of the spiritual exit. It doesn't look like revenge, it looks like resurrection, like stepping out of a tomb they tried to bury you in and walking into destiny with grace in every step. So, Spirit Warrior, remember this, your silence wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Your calmness wasn't fear, it was faith. And your exit, it wasn't the end, it was the beginning of something heaven had been planning for all along. You didn't break down, you broke through. And now, the same people who once looked down on you have to look up just to see where you went. You were never just a part of their story. You were the plot twist they didn't see coming. Let's get into how this divine strategy changed everything. Point 1. They never saw it coming. The art of the unannounced exit. You didn't scream, you didn't slam doors, you didn't throw shade on social media, drop passive-aggressive quotes, or fire off dramatic farewells. You just vanished. Smooth, clean, undetected. And that silence, that was thunder to their spirit. Because spirit warriors don't make announcements, they make moves. And when God says go, you don't need permission, explanation, or validation. You just disappear from the scene like smoke in the wind, and the mystery of your absence becomes louder than any confrontation ever could. What most people don't understand is that true spiritual power doesn't perform. It doesn't grandstand or seek attention. It operates in the unseen. There's actually a psychological and spiritual phenomenon at play here called the phantom effect. It happens when someone suddenly detaches without closure, and the mind of the one left behind spirals trying to fill in the gaps. Your silence, your exit, becomes a mirror. It forces them to face what they tried to suppress. They'll replay your last words like hidden codes, dig through your old posts like digital archaeologists, and even question their own memory, because deep down, they felt that shift. They felt something divine had moved you. And here's the thing about spirit warriors. You don't need closure because you carry divine clarity. Your assignment had expired. Your time in that environment, that relationship, that energy, It was done. And no, it wasn't your job to convince anyone of your decision or your growth. That's the difference between a worldly exit and a divine one. Worldly exits look for attention. Divine exits are born in obedience. When you walk with God, He becomes your GPS, and sometimes He doesn't say, "Turn right," with a flashing sign. He says it in a whisper, a nudge, a feeling, and because you're tuned in, you listen even if you don't fully understand. People often mistake quiet exits as weakness or coldness, but silence is one of the most powerful spiritual tools a warrior can wield. According to neuropsychology, silence activates the brain's default mode network, meaning your mind enters deep reflection and healing. So when you vanished, you weren't avoiding, you were evolving. You were giving your soul space to breathe, to regroup, to align. And while they were still in the loop of drama and gossip, you were crossing dimensions, healing bloodlines, and entering new chapters that weren't built on chaos but calling. The truth is, your leaving wasn't about them. It was about the next level of you. And spirit warriors don't drag baggage into new seasons. That's why when the Spirit says move, you move light. No explanations, no guilt, no second thoughts. You don't ghost them because you're petty. You leave because you're prophetic. And your absence, it becomes a prophecy in their life, a sign, a shaking, a reminder that not everyone is replaceable. And oh, how they scrambled, checking your profile like it held the answers, asking mutuals who saw it coming, replaying conversations, searching for signs, but there were none. Because your movement wasn't loud, it was sacred, protected, covered. And when God seals a chapter, He makes it clean, no chaos, just closure from above. So if anyone ever tries to tell you that silence is weakness, remember this. A lion doesn't roar when it leaves the jungle. It walks with presence. You didn't leave to hurt them. You left to heal you. And in doing so, you became living proof that when God ordains your steps, you don't have to shout. You just have to walk quietly, boldly, obediently, like the spirit warrior you are. Point 2, you outgrew the chaos. Let's be real. Spirit warriors don't belong in confusion. Confusion isn't your natural habitat. It's a battlefield designed to distract you from your mission. You were never meant to stay in places where clarity dies and loyalty wears a mask. And at some point you realized that. You didn't get louder, you got clearer. You stopped asking why they changed, why the energy shifted, and why the room felt colder even when people smiled. You stopped decoding the silent shade and started reading the room for what it really was. A place that couldn't hold your frequency. That's when the real transformation began. See, confusion is often manufactured, spiritually and psychologically. It's a tactic. In spiritual warfare, confusion is one of the oldest tricks in the dark energy playbook. It's the fog that keeps you second-guessing your gifts. It keeps you in a loop of overthinking, self-doubt, and people-pleasing. But you, spirit warrior, weren't built to second-guess. You were built to see through, and the moment you began to notice the patterns, those shady side glances, the performative applause, the way they always seem to highlight your mistakes and downplay your wins, you didn't lash out. You didn't start flipping tables. You are elevated. Let's talk about that. Elevation. Because when you rose, you did it differently. While they were busy playing chess, trying to strategize your downfall, pitting people against each other, pretending to be supportive while praying for your failure, you became the board. You transcended the game entirely, and that's what rattled them. Spiritually speaking, you stepped into your higher self frequency. You started honoring your intuition, protecting your peace, and walking with intention. You stopped fighting for seats at tables where the food was laced with envy. You built your own table, and the chairs come with discernment. Here's what people don't understand about spirit warriors. You're not here to fit in, you're here to shift atmospheres. And your presence alone starts exposing every hidden agenda in the room. It's not that you try to intimidate people, it's that your authenticity disrupts their performance. You didn't have to call them out, you didn't have to clap back, you simply existed in truth. And that truth became a mirror. And when insecure souls look into that mirror, they don't see you. They see every part of themselves they've been suppressing. Spiritually, this is divine alignment doing what it does best, separating light from shadows. The more aligned you became, the more misaligned they appeared. That's why things got weird. That's why the compliments started sounding like insults. That's why the support came with side eyes. And that's why some people switched up without warning. They couldn't manipulate what they couldn't understand, and they couldn't understand you because you operate from a realm beyond ego, beyond pettiness, beyond their matrix of approval. In psychology, this dynamic is called cognitive dissonance. When someone is confronted with a truth that contradicts their false narrative, it creates internal tension. Most people either evolve or attack the source of the tension, and since you refused to shrink, you became the tension. But here's the beauty. Real spirit warriors never shrink to make others comfortable. You walk with purpose, you walk in clarity, you walk in warrior-level self-awareness, and that scares people who live in confusion because clarity always exposes deception. So no, you didn't betray anyone. You just stopped betraying yourself. You didn't abandon them. You just returned home to your soul. And in doing that, you reminded them, without a single word, of who they pretend to be. And that's why the air changed when you walked in. That's why they whispered. That's why you don't get invited, and still, somehow, they can't stop watching you. You became proof that rising without revenge is possible. Keep walking, spirit warrior. You're not lost. You're just beyond their map. Point 3. You were never meant to stay there. You thought that job, that relationship, and that circle were your final destination? Nah, spirit warrior, that was never your palace. That was a pit stop, a dusty little training ground disguised as permanence. But here's where the story gets good. They thought they had you locked in for life. They thought they were your ceiling, when really they were just the floor of your next level. Plot twist? That so-called trap was heaven's boot camp. And baby, you didn't escape. You graduated. See, spirit warriors aren't born fully armored. We're shaped by pressure, by fire, by silent seasons where we feel overlooked, underappreciated, and caged. But spiritually, that was a divine setup. Psychologists call it post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where people don't just bounce back from hard times, they transform. You didn't just survive the chaos, you observed it, you took notes, you saw through the illusions, that boss who undermined you, that lover who gaslit you, those friends who only clapped when you were small, they all became your syllabus. And you passed with flying colors. This is what they'll never understand. The spirit warrior doesn't announce their departure. They just rise one day, lighter, clearer, done. And when you left, it shook the room, not because you were loud, but because your energy took the light with it. They weren't ready for that kind of silence. Why? Because it exposed their noise. Let's talk spiritual facts for a moment. Every major prophet, mystic, and warrior of light in history, Moses, Buddha, Harriet Tubman, and Malcolm X, went through a wilderness, an exile, a pit stop. That pause wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The mountain isn't conquered at the summit, it's conquered in the dark, lonely base camps where you learn how to breathe at new altitudes. That job, that was your base camp, that toxic partner, base camp. That friend group that never evolved, base camp. And while they laughed at you for staying quiet, staying humble, and staying loyal, the divine was building your discernment muscle. You weren't stuck, you were studying. That pit stop taught you patterns, how manipulation dresses up as love, how gossip camouflages as concern, and how hierarchy often hides incompetence. And when you were ready, your spirit whispered, "It's time." You didn't run, you didn't rage, you just gathered your light, packed up your lessons, and left. Here's what makes this moment powerful. You didn't leave empty-handed, you left with wisdom, with vision, with scars that now speak fluently in discernment. And now that you've graduated, you see it clear as day. They never had power over you, they just had access. And access can be revoked. What they call ghosting, you call graceful departure. What they called too much, you now realize was just too real for the illusion they were living in. You weren't breaking down, you were breaking out. Sociologists talk about liminality, a transitional space between two states of being. That pit stop, that was your liminal space. It felt uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and even painful. But that's where spirit warriors are reborn. You were never meant to pitch a tent there. You were meant to pass through, level up, and build elsewhere. Now you're in a new dimension. The air is different here. You don't need permission to speak truth. You don't need validation to trust your gut. You're walking in rooms you used to pray for, And now you are the answered prayer someone else's spirit has been waiting for. So don't look back with bitterness. Look back with honor. Because that pit stop was never your palace. It was your preparation ground. And that exit, that wasn't cowardice. That wasn't retreat. That was graduation. Cap and gown invisible, but your glow unmistakable. Point 4, your exit exposed everything. Once you left, Spirit Warrior, the energy shifted, and not in a subtle way. It was as if someone turned on a blacklight in a dark room, and suddenly every hidden stain, every lie, and every fragment of shadow was fully exposed. The masks they wore, those expertly crafted facades of sweetness, kindness, leadership, or loyalty, began to crumble under the weight of your absence. You weren't just part of the environment, you were the stabilizer, the one who kept things in harmony. And when did the stabilizer leave the system? Chaos. What's wild is that you didn't have to call anyone out. You didn't have to throw dirt or expose their skeletons. All you did was quietly pack your spiritual bags, reclaim your peace, and walk away. That simple act, it was louder than any confrontation because your presence, Spirit Warrior, was their cover. Your light was so powerful, it created an illusion that they were the ones glowing. But when you took your light away, it became glaringly obvious who had been hiding behind it the whole time. Psychologically speaking, this is called social mirroring. Toxic people often attach themselves to someone with a solid sense of identity, someone grounded, someone empathic, like you, because your emotional clarity helps them appear more stable and functional than they actually are. It's not just about friendship or romance, it's spiritual camouflage. You were the mirror they used to reflect back a version of themselves that seemed whole, healed, and high vibrational. But when the mirror walked out, the illusion shattered. Suddenly, people started noticing how manipulative they actually were, how their charm was conditional, how their so-called leadership was built on intimidation or gossip. It's like a spiritual ecosystem losing its keystone species. You remove the central element and the whole system falls into disarray. That's the kind of power you hold, and don't get it twisted. This isn't ego, it's awareness. Because a spirit warrior doesn't boast, they just are. Your removal didn't create the dysfunction, it revealed it, and this is where it gets spiritual. In many sacred teachings, light is associated with revelation. When light enters a dark place, it doesn't argue with the shadows, it simply makes them visible. That's exactly what your energy does. When you walk into a room aligned, discerning, and spiritually rooted, you don't have to speak much. Your being alone calls things into alignment or sends dysfunction running for cover. And that's why, after you left, the drama exploded. The gossip hit new highs. The accusations started flying. People who once called each other besties now couldn't stand each other. The balance was gone because the balance was you. You didn't just offer peace, you enforced it by being a living example of integrity. People behaved better when you were around, not because you told them to, but because your vibe set the standard. And when that standard disappeared, they reverted back to their lowest selves. Not because you changed them, but because they were never changed to begin with. They were only pretending. It's a heavy truth, but a liberating one. You now see the power of your presence and the weight of your energy. You're not just a good friend or a reliable partner. You're a spiritual anchor, a divine recalibrator, a soul that cleanses the space without even trying. That kind of energy doesn't just disappear, it echoes. Even in your absence, the effects linger. People will talk, they'll twist stories, and they'll even blame you for breaking the group apart. But the truth? You didn't break anything. You just stopped holding it all together. So let them unravel, Spirit Warrior. Let the masks fall and the chaos reveal what you already knew. You weren't just part of the story. You were the page it was written on. Point 5, God covered your steps. Some folks are still scratching their heads, Spirit Warrior. They look at your life, your calm, your glow, your resilience, and they're confused. They can't understand how you got through what should have broken you. They don't know how you went from overlooked to unforgettable, from struggling to shining. What they fail to realize is this. You didn't walk alone. The path you're on, it wasn't made by your hustle alone. It was cleared by divine forces that operate in realms they can't perceive. That's not just momentum, that's alignment. And alignment is a force more powerful than luck, louder than applause, and deeper than logic. See, when a spirit warrior is aligned, things move in silence. You don't need the validation of the crowd because you're being backed by something bigger. While others were trying to sabotage your name, the universe was preparing a table for you. Favor followed you like a shadow. Peace wrapped around you like armor. Doors that should have stayed shut swung open, not because of charm or clout, but because heaven said, make way. That's not superstition. That's spiritual law in action. Here's the truth most folks miss. Alignment is about being in sync with your higher calling. When you're in alignment, you don't have to force things. You don't chase, you attract. Your energy, your vibration, your intentions, when they match the divine blueprint written for your life, everything else falls into place. That strange peace you had when things were falling apart, that wasn't denial. That was spiritual assurance. You weren't lucky, you were led. In ancient cultures, from the Zulu tribes of Africa to the indigenous people of South America, warriors weren't just fighters. They were spiritually attuned beings. Their strength didn't come from brute force alone, but from being in rhythm with nature, ancestors, and divine timing. That's you. You've been moving in rhythm with something sacred, and the world can't explain that, so they call it luck. But deep down you know better. You've felt the nudges, you've heard the whispers. You've walked into rooms you didn't plan for, yet you were fully prepared. That's alignment. And because your journey defies logic, people get uncomfortable. They can't accept that favor chose you. That peace followed you when you should have been panicking. That after everything you went through, you still rose. Spirit warrior, it wasn't magic, it was a mission. You were being covered, directed, protected. While they were watching your downfall, angels were building your next chapter. So don't bother explaining. Let them stay confused. Because some things aren't meant to be understood, they're meant to be witnessed. Let your life be that testimony. Let your alignment continue to speak. Let your peace disturb those still hiding in chaos. You didn't just survive, you arrived. And not because of who you knew, but because of who knew you. That's not luck, that's alignment. That's divine orchestration. That's what happens when a spirit warrior stops chasing and starts walking in purpose. Point 6, your success is your silent clapback. Now look at you, growing, glowing, thriving. You don't have to throw shade. Your elevation does that for you. Every time they check your story or hear about your progress, they're reminded you weren't the problem. You were the prophecy. Spirit warrior, let's break this down. This isn't just poetic hype, it's a spiritual fact. See, when you step into your power, when you stop apologizing for your growth, when you start moving with purpose and peace, your very existence becomes a reflection of truth. And you know what happens when truth walks in. Lies lose their grip. Illusions start to tremble. People who once painted you as the villain start to panic because your glow exposes the shadows they tried to throw over you. You're not shining to blind anyone. You're just no longer dimming your light to comfort their darkness. Think about this. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. The mental discomfort people feel when they're confronted with evidence that contradicts what they've believed or told themselves. So when they see you thriving, when they hear your name come up in rooms they swore you'd never enter, their narrative starts to crumble. You, spirit warrior, represent that contradiction. You were supposed to fail. You were supposed to fold. You were the underdog, the scapegoat, the too much or not enough. And now, you're the standard, the blueprint, the walking proof that healing, elevation, and divine alignment are not just real, they're unstoppable. And let's be real, they see you every single time, even if they unfollow, block, or pretend you don't exist. Your energy walks in rooms you've never entered. Your progress whispers in their ears when they scroll past your name or hear your victories through the grapevine. And here's the kicker. You don't even need to announce anything. You don't clap back. You don't seek revenge. You don't fight fire with fire. Why? Because elevation speaks louder than retaliation. Spirit warriors play the long game. We understand that transformation is the best testimony. Not because we want to prove them wrong, but because our truth demands to be lived out loud. And when your life becomes a sermon, those who threw stones become silent congregants listening from the shadows. Energetically, your rise is sacred. According to spiritual law, especially the law of vibration, when you raise your frequency, when you heal, forgive, grow, and evolve, you naturally repel low vibration behaviors and people. That's why certain people start acting strange when you level up. They're not confused, they're convicted. Your growth reminds them of everything they chose not to confront in themselves. Your glow is a mirror, and what they see in it either inspires them or threatens them. So no, you don't have to get petty, you don't have to explain, argue, or post subliminals. Keep watering your garden. Keep planting seeds in silence. Because the louder your life becomes, the quieter their lies get. Gossip dies in the presence of undeniable truth. And you, spirit warrior, are walking, talking, undeniable proof that destiny always finds its way, even through betrayal, heartbreak, and isolation. Let them watch. Let them wonder how you're still rising after everything. Because while they tried to bury you, they didn't know you were a seed. And now, you're not just rising, you're blooming, wild, untamed, radiant. And your story, it's not a clapback. It's a prophecy fulfilled. So walk boldly, spirit warrior. You don't need to throw shade when your elevation already casts it. Point 7, this was your spiritual Oscar moment. You played your role with divine grace. You stayed silent in storms, kind in chaos, and loyal in lies. And when the time came when your soul whispered now, you executed the cleanest exit this realm has ever seen. Spirit warriors, that wasn't acting, that was anointing. That wasn't a performance, that was prophecy in motion. And while the world watched in shock, the heavens stood. Let's break this down. What you did wasn't just powerful, it was sacred. Psychologically, when someone remains calm during manipulation, that calmness disarms control tactics. Manipulators depend on reaction to maintain dominance. But you gave them silence. That's why they were shaken. Your refusal to engage stripped their power away like wind, peeling the mask off a deceiver. And when you finally walked, without drama, without explanation, it sent a ripple through the spiritual and emotional field they were never ready for. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to expose them with receipts. You exposed them by healing. That's the move they never see coming. See, when you decide to take the high road, and not the one they paved with guilt and gaslighting, it's not just maturity, it's divine warfare. You're not escaping the mess, you're outgrowing it. And that's a spiritual upgrade most people never reach. Spirit warriors, let's get factual for a second. Studies in behavioral psychology show that narcissistic personalities experience a kind of ego injury when the person they tried to control finally detaches without explanation. That detachment, it's not indifference, it's evolution. You emotionally unplugged from a power source that was draining you, and suddenly their control didn't work anymore. You were no longer a puppet in their show. You became the playwright of your own destiny. Spiritually, this is what we call the anointed exit. It's when the Most High orchestrates your departure so seamlessly, so unbothered, it confuses your enemies and confirms your calling. People expect explosions, but you gave them peace. They expected chaos, but you walked in silence. That's how they knew something greater was backing you. You didn't just survive the fire, you mastered it. You became fireproof. This is what happens when a spirit warrior chooses to leave with dignity instead of destruction. It's not weakness, it's spiritual strength, because anyone can yell, anyone can slam a door. But it takes divine discipline to walk away with your crown straight and your heart clean. You knew they weren't ready for the healed version of you, so you stopped trying to convince them. You stopped rehearsing your worth for people committed to misunderstanding your script. And here's the truth, they never expected you to leave because they thought your loyalty was submission. But you weren't loyal to them. You were loyal to God's assignment on your life. That's why when the assignment shifted, you didn't ask for permission to exit. You followed divine instruction. That's warrior code. And oh, did the spiritual realm celebrate. Your silent exit rang louder than any argument ever could. Because the enemy's greatest fear isn't confrontation, it's your clarity. It's you realizing who you are, what you carry, what you deserve. The moment you remembered your value, the game was over. Let them talk. Let them spin their stories, rewrite the plot, and twist the truth to suit their comfort. What they say now doesn't define you. What speaks louder than anything their words could ever fabricate. You left not because you were weak, but because you had the wisdom to walk away from chaos that threatened your peace. You didn't slam the door. You simply closed it gently behind you and let silence speak volumes. The people who witnessed your graceful exit will remember the strength it took, the composure you carried, and the light you refused to dim. When the dust finally settles, truth will rise, and those who were genuine will still be standing. Because karma, while invisible and often underestimated, is one of life's most consistent forces. It may not operate on our schedule, but its timing is divinely accurate. You don't have to seek revenge or vindication. All you have to do is keep walking, keep healing, keep ascending. You're not here to collect applause from the crowd. You've got angels clapping in heaven. What you're building is sacred, not for show. That's Oscar. It's meaningless in the grander scheme. Fame fades, attention shifts, but eternity, that's what you're investing in. You're collecting something far richer than awards. You're earning peace, wisdom, resilience, and spiritual wealth. Crowns don't rust because they're forged in fire, trials, and truth. And royalty, true royalty, never chases gossip. It doesn't chase people, attention, or validation. A spirit warrior doesn't turn back to check if they're being talked about. They keep moving forward because their mission is higher. Their eyes are fixed on purpose, not petty distractions. You didn't just leave the room, you rose above it. You didn't just exit the relationship, the job, or the friendship. You transcended the lesson it taught you, and heaven took note. Because sometimes the holiest act isn't to stay and fight, it's to walk away with dignity. Not because you gave up, but because you grew up. Not in bitterness, but in wisdom. There is spiritual maturity in silence, in knowing you no longer need to be understood, defended, or validated by those who never truly saw you in the first place. God gave you clarity, and with that came your release. Closure is for those who are still confused about what they're holding on to. But when God shows you what it is and what it isn't, you don't beg for explanation, you obey. This is not the end of your story. It's the opening chapter of your legacy. Your exit wasn't failure, it was elevation. You walked out of what was toxic to make room for what is divine, and that is powerful. So stay awake, stay rising, and never, ever apologize for honoring the call of your higher self. The world may not understand your silence, but heaven honors your obedience. You didn't just leave, you ascended, and your path is only going higher from here. Keep going, warrior. You're not walking away, you're walking your throne.